Good afternoon and welcome to the first episode of our 10 years, 10 minutes live interview series after the summer break. Today we'll kickstart together our second season, and I wanted to use this special occasion to thank again my predecessor Raja Mekwa for her intuition to quickly digitalize further our activities and also the great discussion events she hosted. Big kudos also to the LPA team for the flawless delivery. We will pursue the series on a bi-monthly frequency, sometimes invite more than one guest, and continuously look for inspired and inspiring speakers. The questions, as usual, can be asked then via the chat function or the Q&A button. You know the drill already. Without further ado, please welcome now Carine Feipel, Chair of ILA, and also Yann Power, Co-Chair of ILA's Alternatives Task Force. Could you please introduce yourselves and also share with our audience what the mission of ILA is and who your members are?
Well, thanks, Stefan. So I'll get started if you agree, Jan. So my name is Carine Feipel. As Stefan said, I'm the chair of ILA. I'm a lawyer by education, but for the past 6 years now, I've been working mostly as an independent director in a number of companies. I sit on the board of a bank, several insurance companies, some funds. Obviously, you cannot, I guess, be a Luxembourg director without being on the board also of some funds or management companies. And I've been chairing ILA for over a year now, about a year and a half. It's a great experience. To tell you what ILA is, for those of you who don't know ILA, it's a professional association like yourself, a not-for-profit association. We focus on the profession of directors. So we're interested in all topics that relate to corporate governance or governance more generally speaking. So we help our members, whether they are directors or interested in topics of corporate governance, to be on the top of what is corporate governance, how governance evolves, what changes come. So we do a lot of trainings for members, we do publications, brochures, but we also do, I don't like the term of lobbying, but public advocacy, as we say. So try to help Luxembourg being also a country at the top of governance. We have a number of different working groups or task force in different sectors or for specific topics. And Jan is here because he's co-chairing our Alternatives Task Force. And so I'll hand over to you, Jan.
Thank you, Carine, and thank you, Stefan. So my name is Yann Power. I'm regulatory expert at ME Business Solutions, which we usually call MEBS, focusing mainly on compliance and anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing topics. So you might call me a bit of a regulatory geek, actually. And the capacity in which I speak to you today is as co-chairman of the ILA Alternatives Task Force. The ILA Alternatives Task Force was set up to help directors, first of all, understand, navigate, I would say, master the alternative funds and alternative fund managers, so the alternative structures that they are responsible for, and implement, I would say, good governance within those structures. So that's the objective of the Alternatives Task Force, in summary. And we are part of the Funds Committee, which is really focused on improving corporate governance across the fund industry.
Like for other active associations, we assume that the last few months have been challenging due to the COVID-19 pandemic and confinement. How did you cope with it?
Well, first of all, for ILA, obviously, like for all other associations, the primary goal was to make sure our staff was safe. So keeping them from coming to the office, but making sure they were set up to work from home. I think we were very successful in setting that up very quickly and efficiently. Then obviously the goal was to continue to serve our members. ILA has about 2,000 members. These are individuals, but these are also corporates. These are not all directors, but as I said earlier, people interested in good governance. And so we had to make sure that we continue to serve them, provide information to them, especially in that crisis situation where we were all in and in a way continue to be in. So to help them manage governance in the companies in which they are the best we all could during that crisis. So we had a lot of online discussions that were set up. We created coffee chats on different topics. I think we had about 10 or 12 during that period on a weekly basis with different speakers on different topics. We had a number of publications that came out to help board of directors during the crisis on sometimes more general questions and sometimes as specific as, you know, what you need to be careful about when you approve financials in a time of crisis, because obviously there were specific disclosures that needed to be included in the financial statements, etc. So we had a number of our working groups which very quickly produced guidance for our members, and I think we've been quite efficient on that. And then Jan was obviously more involved on whatever was related to the alternative funds, and there were a number of initiatives also that came out of the funds committee and the alternatives task force, right, Jan?
Thank you, Carine. Yes. So I think from the perspective of the fund industry, the COVID-19 crisis was really quite a complex crisis, or is a complex crisis, and I would say that it's quite unique. Unique in the sense that it's what I would call a systemic crisis. When we usually prepare for a crisis, we think about something stopping functioning at the level of the investment fund manager. The IT system stops working or something like that. Here, the whole system around us collapsed. So we had to completely change a whole series of working processes and deal with a whole series of issues that we didn't expect to have to deal with before. So what we felt was that it was important, and considering the complexity of the fund industry, it was important to help directors, first of all, to identify the issues. Some of them Carine has already mentioned, and secondly, to try and handle those issues. So our activities, I would say, from the perspective of the funds working groups has really been around that. And Carine already mentioned the coffee chats, for example. So the coffee chats, we ran a couple of those about some of the issues that directors and investment funds and fund managers are facing in the context of COVID-19. We also had a specific one, for example, on illiquid funds in the context of COVID-19 and some of the specific challenges that are faced by illiquid funds. Then there is, of course, within the funds committee, there are two forums which are very active. So the directors forum and the conducting officers forum. Now they are opportunities for directors and conducted officers to discuss issues that are topical at the time. And so, of course, they have taken the opportunity of these forums to be, discussing and trying to implement good governance practices within the context of the COVID-19 crisis. One of the other things that we did, which I hope has been very helpful to directors, is we brought out a kind of a guide, a kind of a list of topics, some of which were based on what the regulators were saying, to again help directors, investment funds and investment fund managers to identify the issues. That was really the objective of the guide. So it was called Topics for Boards of Investment Fund Managers and Investment Funds to Consider During the COVID Crisis. Also, I think I'd like to mention, everybody probably knows the ILA and PwC Fund Survey. Well, of course, there's an example of how things were tailored during the COVID crisis. Some of the questions were tailored to the issues that have come up within the COVID crisis, but also the whole issuance of this survey during the crisis enables the people who are running the survey to assess what sort of impact this crisis has and the level of governance of investment funds and investment fund managers. So with all of these activities, should we say, focusing on the crisis issues, I have to say that some of our more regular training programs have been pushed back a little bit.
But still, congratulations for that good handling of the crisis. And now integrating this complex situation into your day-to-day activities must have led to some changes, as you highlighted already. Are you currently developing new projects, changing some of your habits, or even evolving into an ILA?
Well, yes, in a way we need to change, obviously, the way we do things. Jan just finished off by saying that we had to put some trainings on hold. Yes, that is right. But now after the summer and already in June, we started again with a number of trainings and even in-person trainings. And we are really assessing for each of our trainings whether we can do it online or whether it's preferable to do it in person. It really depends on the trainings. There are some where it's easy to do it online. There are others where sometimes even our trainers tell us, no, I really want to be in the room with the participants. And so we have now, I think, a good setup with the Chamber of Commerce where we often do our trainings, which is very, safe in all requirements that we need to put in place, social distancing, etc., to be able to offer safe trainings to our participants. We wouldn't do it otherwise. But it is true that it has a big impact on the way we do things, and our staff has been extremely busy handling all of that, rearranging things, thinking about what is the best we can do for our members. Now, is ILA going to be an e-ILA, as you say? I would say we're becoming more digital. Yes, we already were digital, becoming more digital. We created a COVID resource center on our website. As I said, we're doing more and more e-trainings. We have developed now an AML e-training that we will be launching shortly, because that's obviously a hot topic for funds, but also for other directors. But generally speaking, I don't think we will become all digital, because the relationship in between persons, the networking, the discussions you can have with people when you're in a room, when you're around a coffee or a drink or some food, is not the same than what you can do online. So we are very, very impatient to be able to do our events again in person. I think definitely we will keep a digital part in our activities, certainly. We will have some events that will be hybrid, definitely. Some people being in the room, others joining by Zoom or other tools. So we are evolving, definitely. Unfortunately, the COVID crisis hit us in our anniversary year, because ILA is turning 15 in 2020. We had a big celebration planned in June, which we had to postpone. So we have now scheduled to do that in June next year. It will still be the 20th anniversary celebration, even though we will be 21 already. But it was the best thing to do for members. And we really hope that we can celebrate in person with our members next year. We also have our Directors' Day, which is our big annual event in November, which is coming up pretty soon, and where we decided now this morning, we had a meeting about it, that it will be a virtual event. So we will be holding the event with the agenda as we had planned it. And there is a dedicated session for funds also, and other very interesting topics. Claude Marx will be a speaker as well. But it will be done virtually to keep our members and our staff safe. The in-person event we are doing at the end of this month is our golf day, because we think that playing golf outdoors is safe even in COVID times. But it will also be a reduced agenda, so the networking part of the golf day will unfortunately fall away. So that's how we are evolving. Also taking into account, as Jan said, that COVID-19 is raising a lot of questions, a lot of topics. So we also try to address these with our members, as we have since March now.
So happy birthday then again, ILA. We're a little bit younger, but I think we share lots of common ideas and topics. On our side, we also still love the human touch and also contact. But in order to make sure that everything can run nicely this year, especially, we also have decided to move, let's say, our Insights conference into a virtual one, and that should be also at the end of the year. Jan.
But Stefan, maybe
yes.
Speaking of birthdays or anniversaries, I saw there was a question in the Q&A here in the chat about specifically ILA turning 15 and what prompted the creation of ILA. So very quickly, the reason why ILA was created 15 years ago, and I wasn't a member at the time, so I'm just speaking about what I heard, was to improve governance, to improve corporate governance, especially in the funds industry. That was initially the target of ILA: help fund directors become better directors, become more efficient directors, be really professional directors, and improve corporate governance. And when I look back at what ILA is today and what we offer members today and how professional the ILA members today are as directors, I think that we have achieved our purpose. And today ILA is not just about fund directors, but it's a global professional association. Of course, there are still things we can do better, and we still have a lot of projects on our desks, and thank God we do. But I'm proud of what ILA has achieved over those 15 years, thanks to all the people who led the association and to all its members.
Completely share also the vision to become more and more professional, to develop new synergies, new ideas, and really to show that Luxembourg is also, in our case, the right place to do business, specifically around private equity and venture capital. Jan, as co-chair of ILA's then Alternatives Task Force, let's say you certainly have a whole lot of our members who also are active in, let's say, your association in the preferred private equity venture capital industries. What kind of changes or trends were you able to witness over the last months? Could you share a few examples or simply experiences?
Yes, thank you, Stefan. I mean, I think, you know, the first and most obvious thing is, you know, the COVID crisis has just changed how the way that people work. So that's changed lives, but it's also raised a number of issues. Of course, you know, there are issues like health and safety that have come up, that have had to be dealt with. There are issues related to teleworking. People are now working from home. So there are logistical issues around that, but there are also technical issues around that, such as issues of IT security, data protection, personal data protection. Then there are, should we say, issues around how we work together as organizations, how we hold meetings, virtual meetings over platforms like the one that we are using right now. There are issues for conducting persons, board members in particular, about how they actually go about signing documents, for example. So these are all changes that in the way that we work. And I have to say, my overall experience, rather to my surprise, I have to say, is that it seems that overall the fund industry has done very well dealing with a crisis that they never expected to have to face. As I said before, I see this as a systemic crisis, and in spite of this systemic crisis that nobody was prepared for, working together across the financial sector with organizations like ILA, but also with the understanding of organizations like the CSSF as well, and you know, all of the the commitment of management and directors, it's worked quite well. What I wanted to point out as well is, though, that the COVID crisis has raised a whole series of issues which are unexpected issues for directors to have to handle. And I just wanted to mention a couple of those as well. So, I mean, I think the first and most obvious one is business continuity. You might look at that at the level of the underlying investments. You know, is the company, for example, that you're invested in going to survive? But there's also at the level of the fund itself and at the level of the investment fund manager. Can you continue business? So this very fundamental issue. There are, of course, related to that, issues, of course, of liquidity management. There are issues of valuation. There are issues of relationship with investors. What are you going to tell investors? Carrie mentioned it earlier, disclosures to investors. There are some specific issues that have come up in the context of COVID-19 related to, for example, cybercrime, fraud, attempts at money laundering and terrorist financing. There is additional reporting that you have to do to the authorities. There are tax aspects that needs to be taken into account, including, tax incentives that should, maybe you should consider benefiting from. And then, of course, well, there's this whole, internal communication. So, basically senior management of investment fund manager, for example, will be running the show. How are they reporting to the board? And how is the board of the fund being kept up to date about what's going on? So there are a whole series of issues that have come up for directors. And I've just tried to give a bit of a flavor of some of these issues that have come up for directors in the context of COVID-19. What I also wanted to point out, if I may, is that, that's the reaction to the COVID-19. But we also have what before was business as usual with, for example, new regulations coming on, things coming along and things like that. And so we have to add that. So the normal business of changes in regulations, the new regulation that's been issued by the CSSF just in August, modifying regulation 1202. One of the issues that brings up, which is a big issue for the fund industry, is how do they actually implement anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing controls in relation to the investments of the funds? So in private equity, the underlying funds or the underlying exposures to debt and so on. Just one other issue, don't want to go on too long, but another issue, which is a huge issue, which is coming along for all of us in the industry, is this whole issue of sustainability, taking into account these ESG criteria and making these disclosures. And, the deadline, in March of 2021, that's really tomorrow.
Thanks, Jan. I mean, for illustrating with so many examples and completely true ones, what has happened and what you have to cope with and take into, let's say, integrate it in your business model, why you also need some extra training. And by the way, what kind of solutions or trainings do you propose, let's say, to PE or VC focused independent directors? I'm just asking the question because we launched our first successful LPA training academy this summer and also have an ongoing partnership with Sacred Heart University, and certainly are always looking for new, let's say, training solution. What is it about on your side?
Thank you, Stefan. So, I mean, I'll leave it to Carine to talk about ILA in general, and there are huge initiatives at the level of training and guidance at the level of ILA. I'll just focus on the fund sector. So, first of all, in terms of solutions, you mentioned solutions. I think that's very appropriate. Both the Alternatives Committee and the General Funds Committee have issued guides or FAQs for directors. So these are really to help directors to, again, identify, the broader issues that they may want to be thinking about in order to, again, master their governance challenges in the context of the funds that they are working in. Things like, for example, liability management, that type of thing, as well as, just mastering and understanding the fund structures that they are working on. Another thing that I'd like to mention, we already mentioned it once, is the Directors Forum. So the forum for directors to just exchange views about issues in governance. And again, the Conducting Officers Forum at the level of the investment funds group within ILA. I think I should also mention the ILA PwC Annual Fund Day. So that is a huge opportunity to exchange good practices on governance. In terms of training, we've got quite a broad spectrum of training for directors in the area of funds and investment fund managers. There's the general training program, which is called a training program for fund directors, but obviously it's very relevant for investment fund manager directors as well. Then there's so that's called the roles and responsibilities of fund directors. There's a specific governance training, we call it a basic governance training on AIFs and AIFMs, which is supposed to be really an introductory training for directors of alternative investment funds and alternative investment fund managers. And we also have a masterclass on crisis management. I think we're going to have another look at that, considering the crisis that we've just been through. One of the things I'd just like to say about these training, there's a lot of these training which are case study based. So we were talking about having these things in the classroom in groups and looking at these topics and actually working through practical issues that people have experienced in the fund industry. So this is the sort of thing that we're doing. So there's a limited amount of shall we say, training from the front and an awful lot of classroom participation. Then from the fund's perspective, we also do some specific training courses and events. And just to mention a few of the things that we've got we've got coming up. One event that we would like to organize when we have a little bit more guidance on the issue of anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing is an event on this on investments for directors, so a director's perspective on how to deal with and what to expect in terms of AML, CFT on investments. We are developing a training program on the life cycle of directors, shall we say, from the onboarding of directors all the way through, the life of directors to the resignation of directors, actually, in the context of investment funds, which I think is going to be a fantastic training. Another one on overseeing the investment process. So these are the sorts of solutions and training that we provide as the funds group.
Nice program, indeed. So finally, which requirements are applicable on ILA side in order to join your ranks and become an independent director? In general, would you recommend, I don't know, a specific career path? You're muted, Karen.
Sorry, that wasn't on purpose.
No problem.
Apologies. That shows we're really live, right? So to become a member of ILA, there is no particular requirement, meaning that you don't need to be a director to be a member of ILA. ILA is open to basically anybody who is interested in corporate governance and who sees a benefit in joining the ranks of ILA. So as I said, we have about 2,000 members. Sorry, Stefan, are you speaking to me? Because you're on mute now.
No, it's perfect, Carine. I will
okay,
rebound
apologies.
Afterwards on it. Sorry.
Okay, apologies for that. So our member base is very, very broad. We have a certification program for directors. So people who want to have a stamp on being a certified ILA director, they need to do specific trainings. They need to have an experience of a certain number of years before they can become an ILA certified director. But we also have trainings for people who want to become directors, who are not experienced yet. We call that the aspiring directors. And that is a range of people who are very diverse, who are often younger, who have maybe skills that don't exist at the level of boards, because as you know, diversity on the board, I'm not talking about gender diversity, but the various experiences and competencies that you need in a board. Today, you need people with digital backgrounds, you need people with ESG skills, as Jan mentioned. And so we're trying to bring also that population to the level of being board members. We do mentoring also for people who are interested in being mentored by an experienced director. So it's a very broad range of people that we have in our association. And one of the things I want to mention based on what you said, Stefan, speaking of partnerships, obviously ILA works closely with a number of other associations in Luxembourg, be it ALFI, be it the ABBL, or yourself and as an association. And we are more and more looking also to develop trainings together with the other associations, because we see a big benefit in sharing knowledge and in bringing together people from different backgrounds.
It's like a symphony in our ears. We are also very eager to develop such synergies with yourselves. I think it would really make sense, since we like also the approach, let's say, that there are transversal jobs which you can enter, which can help you to enter the field. And if you get the appropriate training next to that, you can certainly evolve into new careers, but still remaining in this very entrepreneurial and interesting, let's say, industry.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people who are members in both of our associations. And so that also justifies the synergies, definitely.
I think we will certainly have a part 2 interview next year, then, in order to continue those great synergies and see what then has been developed together. Great. We
certainly should do that, yes.
Thanks a lot, Stan, for your insights, for sharing your time, and also all these explanations about ILA and those different training solutions, and also the alternative space. Would there be some, let's say, additional questions from the audience? Now is the time to treat those. Also wanted to thank Laurie, let's say, for her nice messages. It's also a pleasure to meet you here. And if not, then again, Carine, Jan, thanks a lot for joining us for this first episode of our new series. And very happy to pursue the discussions very soon. And here now you can see on the screen, let's say, what we have planned for this month. We'll continue also with the HR webinar on the ESG job profiles with then Huxley Luxembourg. Also a technical webinar dedicated to our LPA members around ATA2. And we will have on September 28th and also Greg Durst from ILPA, around also a quite interesting discussion from the LP perspective. And then on September 30th, then a very nice conversation roundtable within, or with rather, the CSSF and also then our AML legal technical committee. Thanks a lot for attending and see you very soon. Goodbye then.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you.
Bye-bye.